Do you know that there is no greater time than this very moment? The decisions you make today can be the precursor to a better tomorrow. What you invest your time and energy in will determine your ROI, your return on investment. And this video seeks to provide food for your soul and bring change within that unlocks insight. So get ready to receive the keys that unlock the doors within you. And may your cup runneth over. My name is Ezra, A.K.A. the voice of reason. Over and out. Welcome to another edition of Golden Nuggets, bite-sized truths in moments of need. And today we're going to be focusing on self-awareness. And self-awareness is something that's so important for us to fully understand ourselves and be aware of what is going on within us in any given moment so that our decision-making can be productive, fruitful, and bring forth the results that we want. So let's get into this. And to start this off, I want to just put this into perspective because self-awareness is one of the first components of emotional intelligence. And emotional intelligence, or EI or EQ, as is often referred to in short, is the ability to perceive, interpret, demonstrate, control, evaluate, and use emotions to communicate with and relate to others effectively and constructively. And this is so important, emotional intelligence. It affects every area of our lives. It affects every relationship in our lives. It determines the difference between success and failure, between connection and separation, between marriage and divorce. And so it's so important that we take stock of emotional intelligence. And we're going to be looking at all the different areas of emotional intelligence. But for today, we're going to focus on self-awareness. And so there are 5 core components of EI. And these are empathy, social skills, self-awareness, self-regulation, and motivation. And so in the coming episodes, I will be focusing on each one of these. But for today, we're starting with self-awareness. And so just to kind of give us a kind of overview of emotional intelligence and to highlight the different areas and ways that it impacts us. And so for one, it increases your leadership ability, your ability to be able to influence others in a productive way. It increases team performance because others feel validated, feel encouraged, feel supported, and want to give you the best of what they can do. It improves your decision-making because you are much more clearer about yourself. You are much more coordinated and regulated. And also you are able to reflect and see things from other people's perspective. So when you make decisions, they're much more informed. It decreases occupational stress. Why? Because you make better decisions. You engage with others in a much more informative way. And as a result of that, it reduces staff turnover because staff feel listened to, valued, and supported and recognized. And it also increases your personal well-being for multiple factors. And we're going to look at some of those today. And so when we talk about emotional intelligence, we have to mention Daniel Goleman, who is an American psychologist, is an author and a science journalist for the New York Times. And in his book, which was a bestseller for many years, Emotional Intelligence, Daniel suggests that Scoring well in traditional intelligence measures, such as IQ tests, is not a reliable predictor of success outside of the classroom. And he even went as far to show from research that actually IQ only contributes to about 20% of life success. And what the research shows is that actually once someone's IQ reaches about 70, emotional intelligence is a much more important indicator to success. So as long as you've got an IQ of around 70, once you develop your emotional intelligence, you can do much better than someone with an IQ of 160 and no emotional intelligence. And so this stuff is really important. It's vital because 80% of success lies outside of your IQ and is involved in areas that are related to emotional intelligence. And so Daniel Goleman divided emotional intelligence into kind of two sets of competencies, which are personal and social. And when we are thinking about emotional intelligence, that we can recognize that the two different areas that we focus on. One is about ourselves, and the other is more in relation to ourselves and others. Okay? And so when we're thinking about the personal skills or competencies, it's in relation to how we manage ourselves. And so we have self-awareness, which is what we're going to look at today. We have self-regulation, and we have motivation. And then with the social skills or competencies, it's in relation to how we handle our relationships with other people. And within this area, we have the empathy and the social skills. Okay, so I just want to give you an understanding around emotional intelligence as a whole. But now let's focus on self-awareness. And so self-awareness is the skill of being aware of and understanding your emotions as they occur and as they evolve. Meaning that whenever things are happening, whenever there is a change in your internal state, your emotional landscape, that you're able to be aware of this as they occur. And this is really important because for many people, they don't realize the starting point of when they're starting to get anxious, of when they're starting to get worried, or when they're starting to get angry. And it's only as it builds and builds and builds and they blow is the point when they actually are aware of what's happening. And that's often too late. And so self-awareness enables us to be able to make better decisions, because if I can start to feel the energy changing within me, the frequency changing within me, I'm starting to get annoyed by this conversation, I can then choose to exit it before it becomes a problem. Or if I'm anxious around certain people or when I've got to do something and I can pick up on that, I can make more informed choices to say, okay, how am I going to address that? What can I do to manage this so that whether it's a presentation, whether it's talking to people, whether it's being in groups, that I'm able to manage these emotions as they occur and as they evolve. And so that self-awareness is key. It's a game changer, and it makes a big difference to how you show up in the world. And self-awareness is also about the ability to take an honest look at our lives without attachment to it being right or wrong, according to Debbie Ford. And this is a really powerful thing to be aware of, because a lot of the time we put these attachments on things. And when we put an attachment on something to make it either right or wrong, we give way for two different things that can really hinder us. Because when we think we're always right, it gives way to ego, AKA edging greatness out. And when we put the attachment on something being wrong, it gives license to guilt and shame. So we avoid and procrastinate and delay doing that thing. And so self-awareness is about just being aware of what is going on, regardless of whether it is right or wrong, but to be aware of it. Because once you're aware of it, we can do something about it. But if we're always attaching the right or wrong, oh, I shouldn't be thinking that, get away with it. But why did it come? What's the reason for it being there? How do we manage it so it doesn't come back again? So that self-awareness is about having an honest look at what's going on within ourselves without that extra attachment. And so self-awareness, as you must be starting to see already, is the key to self-mastery. It enables us to know ourselves, to know thyself. So you can make the best informed choices about you based on what you are aware of. Because awareness really is like a light. It's illumination. And when you have awareness, i.e. the light is on, you can navigate through situations much better. And I always give people this analogy to say, if you imagine awareness is like a light, and imagine you're in your room now and it's in pitch darkness, it's nighttime. And someone said to you, I'll give you £1,000,000 if you can navigate from your bedroom into the kitchen without touching anything. But it's dark, you're in pitch darkness. Even though you'd really want that money, it's most likely it's not going to happen because you don't have awareness. You don't realize how close you are to different objects to hit it or not. And that's what people can be like in life. You're walking in darkness because you have no self-awareness of you. But once you start to learn and understand yourself better, it's like you turn on that light and you can walk through and navigate through situations and circumstances because you have that awareness. And so one of the things that I want to encourage you all to think about and how to view things is to know and understand that it's wrong to think of emotions as either positive or negative. And why would I say that? Because most people do label emotions as either positive or negative. But the truth of the matter is, do you want to gravitate to anything that's negative? Do you want to engage with people that are always negative? Do you want to be in a workplace that is negative? Do you want to be in a relationship that is negative? And the truth of the matter is no. And so subconsciously, if you are equating emotions to being negative, you would avoid it. And so people avoid what is labeled under those negative emotions. And that stops people from being able to become aware of themselves. And this is where we go back to the quote from Debbie Ford. Self-awareness is to be able to observe it without labeling it. Because whether it is anger, whether it is fear, whether it is guilt, whatever it is you're experiencing, there's a reason for it. And if you don't tap in to understand the reason for it, you can't stop that thing from continuously presenting itself. But on the flip side of that, positive emotions, so joy and happiness and all of these kind of things that people want to experience, which is good. But if you were laughing at someone else's downfall, if you were happy at someone else's plight, if you rejoice in someone else's anguish, is that a good thing? If someone hears that someone's mother's just died and they're happy about it, is that a good thing? No. So when we just focus on positive or negative, it sometimes can be out of sync. And so instead, the better thing to do is to think about emotions as if it is appropriate or inappropriate for this time and with the intensity that we are holding on to it. So Someone can be angry at the fact of an injustice, right? And they could go and shoot someone, right? It's inappropriate. It's anger used in a negative way. But someone else can be really angry at an injustice and they can go and fight for freedom. They can march, they can do things, they can, galvanize people, they can, raise awareness, they can do all of these things like Martin Luther King Jr., which it was appropriate and made a big difference. So it is always about how appropriate or inappropriate something is rather than it being positive or negative. Because you can be annoyed or even angry at someone stepping on your foot and not apologizing. But there's a difference between saying, you just stepped on my foot, it would have been nice if you apologize, and punching them in the face. One's appropriate, one's inappropriate. And so with whatever it is, the emotion you are experiencing, don't label it as positive or negative, but ask yourself, is this appropriate for me to have this? And is the level and the degree to which I'm having this emotion helpful or harmful to me? And so self-awareness, it makes the difference because it enables you to act by what is most important to you. Because if you are self-aware, you can realize that actually what's really impacting me, why I feel angry or upset, is the fact that I've been disrespected. And that's what's important to me. So I'm going to talk to this individual about what I want or how I feel they should be engaging with me, where there's boundaries involved so that I feel respected. But if you don't understand yourself to realize it's about respect, you're just angry and you don't know why. And you can't articulate what it is you want. And so the vacuum happens and people just react. So self-awareness is key. It's foundational. It's foundational. So when we're thinking about self-awareness, it's important to understand that there is three components to it. There's three elements, which are emotional awareness, making an accurate self-assessment, and having self-confidence. So let's look at each one of these briefly. So the first one we're talking about is emotional awareness. Being able to clearly understand yours and other people's feelings in any given moment. And this can be very beneficial for various reasons, but I've got to touch on just four. Because one, it can enable you to communicate your emotional state clearly to others. So it means that because you understand fully what's going on within you, you can articulate that. You can say, when you said that, I felt a bit belittled. When that thing happened, it made me feel betrayed because of X, Y, Z. When you do that, it makes me feel that you don't consider me because you say things that are quite hurtful. So you're able to communicate your emotional state clearly to others so that others can understand what they've done or how it has impacted on you. And then they can make an informed choice whether they will do differently or not. Another thing that it does is it empowers you to move through difficulties faster by using your emotions as a navigational tool. And this is really important because at any time, right, it is however we feel supported or disrespected that moves that navigational pull, right? Every interaction we have with someone, it has an emotional currency, meaning that we either leave people in credit or debit, and others either leave us in credit or debit. And when we are left, when it's a good interaction and we feel that they've topped up our emotional bank account, we feel good. We have better emotions and we feel closer to that individual. And when we have conversations where we feel that we didn't get what we need and we're left drained, then it helps us to understand that actually this conversation, this connection that I have with this individual is not in my best interest. But that navigational pool of understanding your emotions, it helps you to know, actually, I need to speak to this person. Actually, I need to separate from this person. Actually, I need to address this scenario, because you understand what is going on and what is happening. When someone says something to you and it shifts your energy levels, your frequency, your emotional state, you're able to understand that. And because you can understand that, you're able to move through it quicker, because you can make the decisions, you can have the conversations, because you have clarity. Clarity brings change. Confusion brings instability. It will also assist you in setting personal boundaries that work for you. You see, because when you recognize that actually, when you're around someone, or when someone says something, or when someone does something, it affects your emotional state, you then are more aware and have more clarity in being able to set those boundaries. So if I realize every time after I go and visit John, I feel down, I can make a more informed choice that actually, because the conversations John tends to get into, they affect me because they make me start doubting myself. And I start worrying about things that I was never even thinking about before meeting with John. I can set that boundary in place. So whether that will be I don't go and visit John, or whether that will be I say, John, when we meet, I don't particularly want to talk about this area that we often talk about because it affects me. But you are able to set those boundaries because you understand what is impacting on you, what is affecting you, what is changing your emotional state. And the fourth one is that it supports you in making better decisions and knowing when to pause or when to delay. Because there's a difference between the two. And whenever we are emotionally triggered, it's always good to pause so that action does not proceed forward, so that we do not act first, think later, and say, why did I do that? And it also allows you to sometimes delay, because the first instincts of what we think about something may sometimes be wrong. So when we delay in making a decision before we find out more, before we investigate a bit further, or before we find out what is it that triggered me, because someone could say something to you which is perfectly right and perfectly true, but because they said something that takes us back to what someone else said, who may have said it in a malicious way, we then have transference and we're getting upset, not with the person in front of us, but with something else that we are emotionally tied back to that could have happened 2, 5, or 10 years ago. So sometimes to delay so we can think things through and get clarity, that can also help us in making better decisions. So I love this quote, which says, rather than being your thoughts and emotions, be the awareness behind them. And this is the difference between reacting and responding. See, reacting is when you just go with the emotions. You're tossed to and fro by every wind of emotion that you experience. But to respond is a considered reaction. And it's done because of the awareness of not only what you're feeling, but why you're feeling it, and putting it into context to say, is it appropriate or inappropriate for me to have this to this degree with this individual? This is self-awareness. So the second component of self-awareness is to make an accurate self-assessment. The art, and it truly is an art, to know thyself. Because many people don't truly know themselves. They can't articulate and assess who they are and why they think the way they do, even the beliefs that they hold. And so it's so important that we truly know ourselves. And an accurate self assessment is the ability, the know how, the comprehension, and the skills of a person to accurately examine themselves, knowing exactly what you're capable of and what your strengths and limitations are. Accurate self assessment. And this is so important in any area of our lives. Because when we are able to make accurate self assessments, meaning not being fueled by denial, meaning don't even know I am lying, and we set ourselves up for failure because we sign up to things and say we can do things that we don't have the capacity to do. But also that we're not on the other extreme end of this, where we're so riddled by anxiety and fear and limiting beliefs that even the things we can do, we minimize ourselves and deny ourselves the opportunity to do because of how we see ourselves from our limited perspective. So to make accurate self-assessments is so important. It's important when doing an interview. It's important when speaking to someone. It's important when trying for things because it makes the difference between success and failure. It makes a difference between engagement and disengagement. Accurate self-assessments of what was appropriate to say to someone in that scenario. Accurate self-assessments of where you need help and where you can actually do it by yourself. Accurate self-assessments of what you need in any given moment. And to have an accurate self-assessment, you have to have emotional awareness. Because emotions are the key driver of all human behavior. So it's so important. These tools are so important. Self-awareness is the foundation of everything. And so without proper self-evaluation, failure is often inevitable. And all of us can look back in our lives and see times where we didn't self-evaluate properly. And what were the results of that? So it's key, accurate self-assessment. Even many people will say, oh, if this happens to me, this is what I will do. And it's not an accurate self-assessment. When the thing actually happens, we don't react in that way. We hoped to, but we don't actually do it. Accurate self-assessment is key. And so the third and the final part of the three components of self-awareness is self-confidence. And so before we go into this, I want us to fully understand what confidence is, right? So confidence, as you can see, it means a sureness, to have an assurance and a reliance. And so perfect way to expand on these three words is thinking about a chair. So you all have a chair in your house. You may even be sitting on a chair at this present moment as you're listening to this. But before you sat down on that chair, you didn't double check and expect to make sure all the chairs are fine, that there's no cracks, because you had a sureness about this chair. You had an assurance that it will hold your weight. And you have a reliance upon this chair because you constantly sit on it without thinking twice. Self-confidence is to have that in you. A sureness in you, an assurance in you, and a reliance in you. Now, confidence is basically the feeling of trust in your abilities, your qualities, and your judgments. But the only way you can have that is if you are first emotionally aware. So you know that in these types of situations, I can hold my cool. because you have this self-awareness. You have the emotional awareness because you're in tune to you and you know how you are on a day-to-day basis, moment by moment. You have an assurance of what you can do because you make accurate self-assessments. And when you then act on them, it bears fruit. And as a result of these two, it brings a reliance because you know yourself and you make accurate self-assessments of yourself. So when you say or do things, they measure up. The American Psychological Association defines self-confidence as as a belief that one is capable of successfully meeting the demands of a task. And this is what self-confidence is that you have a belief that you are capable of successfully meeting the demands of a task. And that is because you make accurate self-assessments, and that is because you are self-aware. You have emotional awareness. And this is why self-awareness is the foundational and first element of emotional intelligence, because you can't do any of the other stuff if you don't have this in place. And you will see as we go through the other components of emotional intelligence that it all starts here. Because all behavior is belief driven. All behavior is belief driven. Whatever you do, there is a belief behind it. And whenever you don't do, there is a belief behind it, whether it's a limiting belief or it's a belief that says you can do it, whether you have a fixed mindset or a growth mindset. It's a belief behind that. And that belief is based on either your emotional awareness or lack of it, and your accurate self-assessment or your inaccurate self-assessment. And because you don't understand yourself and you make these predictions that are always wrong, your belief is that you don't know what's going on and you're going to make a mistake and you can't do it. But when you are emotionally in tuned and you make accurate self-assessments, you know and understand what you're capable of doing. And you know and understand that you have a belief, an assurance, a sureness, and a reliance that this thing I can do. And so it's important that we have this self-awareness to know and understand. And even in the areas where we have a limiting belief, we are able to tap into to see what is driving that. What emotions bring that up for me? What are the situations and circumstances that I feel that way? And then make an accurate self-assessment around what we can do to change that so it can become a positive belief. And so self-trust is the first secret of success. Because just think about someone who you don't trust, whether it was a partner who cheated on you, whether it was a boss who was bullying you, whether it was a friend that let you down all the time. Just think of the lack of trust you have for them, right? You don't tell them things about yourself. You don't let them know things that's really going on for you. You don't consult them. You don't do anything really that will allow yourself to be exposed to them or vulnerable to them in any way, shape, or form. So if you have a lack of self-trust, what do you think you're doing to you? Why do you think you avoid your emotions? Why do you think you suppress them? Why do you think you don't even talk to yourself in a positive way? Because you have a lack of self-trust. And so self-trust is the first secret of success. So I want to share with you some of the things that I've found out from studies around why it's important to be self-aware. So I'm just going to touch on a couple of things. And this first one is a study from 2017 by the National Institute of Health. And it was on measuring the effectiveness of self-awareness. And they found that people who self-reflected and had high self-awareness tended to have a more positive self-image and a deeper understanding of others. So in other words, the more that you reflect, the more that I reflect, and the higher our self-awareness is, it has a twofold blessing. One, in creating a positive image in me because I truly know and understand myself. And anything that is not right, I can pick up on it straight away and address it before it becomes a big mountain. And secondly, it also helps me to be able to do that in others. So it gives me a deeper understanding of others. And this can help me in terms of learning how to connect with them, how to communicate with them, and even how to give feedback to them. And it leads to greater empathy. And that's something we're going to look at in detail when we look at the element of empathy. Those who have a higher self-awareness also tend to be more proactive in a work environment. So if you want to be productive at work, you want to get a promotion, you want to be seen, you want to make a difference, work on your self-awareness. That will directly drive you to being more proactive and display better communication skills. Why? Because you can articulate from a clear perspective of who you are, because your emotions are the driving force that connects you to who you really are, why you feel the way you feel, and what it is that you truly want to do. And the third point I want to make around this was another study from 2016 by the NIH. And it said that the increased positive characteristics that result from high self-awareness can lead to improved well-being. So many people set their goals for 2024. I want to be healthy. I want to be well. And they would think about diet and exercise. And don't get me wrong, all of those things are good. But remember, self-awareness is an inside job. Self-awareness is tied to your thoughts, which we have 60 to 70,000 of them a day. 90% of those are rumination. So if you're focusing on eating a couple times a day and exercising maybe a couple times a week and forgetting what you were doing 60 to 70,000 times a day, remember that your diet is not just food. And so by having an increased self-awareness, it would increase your positive characteristics, your mindset, your self-control, your attitude, your conduct, your belief system. All of these things have an impact and contribute to your improved well-being. And so, you know, I've touched on some key areas here, some which you may feel I'm not actually doing that yet. So I don't want to leave you in limbo. I'm going to share with you some tips, some simple, effective, and practical tips that you can do to develop your own self-awareness. So the first one is keeping a daily journal. Why? Because this helps to raise your awareness and it promotes reflection. So focus on what went well today. Focus on what emotions you experience. Focus on how did you feel when engaging with a particular individual. These kind of things can help you to have more awareness. And that awareness promotes reflection. Because if you was with someone that made you feel good, why did it make you feel good? If you went through a particular experience and you felt a bit anxious, why did you feel anxious? Because then you can recognize how to create more of the environments that you do like and what you can do to change the ones that you don't. Seek feedback from others. So it's important for us to be aware of how we feel and what's going on, but that's just one side of the coin. The other side of the coin is to seek feedback from others and to be wise with this, not just any old person, but from people who you value and trust. So the rule of thumb is this: if there is someone you wouldn't go to for help, why are you going to go to them to find out about the things you're doing wrong? Right? So get wise when you're seeking feedback from people you trust, people who will be honest with you and would also tell you when you're in the wrong. Don't go to yes men and yes women, because that's just going to keep you in delusion, right? But feedback is the breakfast of champions. So seek it. The next is to identify your values. One of the greatest and most important things that you can do is be connected to your values. Because when you value your values, they will value you. And my definition of values is that they are your internal GPS navigation system that navigates you through life internally. So that with whatever you're doing, with whatever decisions you're making, if it lines up with your values, then you could be assured that you were doing the right thing because it's aligned to what's important to you. There are so many people who do not even know what their values are. So my question is, how do you know when you're making the right decision when there is a high stakes situation if you do not know your values, which is like the roots if you was a tree? Because it should be the first thing and the last thing you consider whenever making a decision. And so become connected and united with your values, and they will become your guiding principles and your internal compass. Another idea which you can do is read fiction. Why? Because those stories, those analogies, right, allow you to walk in someone else's shoes. And you can do two things with that. It can help you to consider how other people would feel from those stories, but you can also put yourself in the shoes. How would you feel if that was you? What would you do if that was you? And be aware of yourself, of how you feel, of how the story takes you, what it brings up in you. Why do you feel those emotions when you are reading this fiction? Very important in increasing your self-awareness. Practice gratitude. This is so important that you practice gratitude. The art of being intentional about what is valuable for you and what you appreciate in life, in spite of the things that you don't currently have. And this tool of practicing gratitude can help you to become more self-aware. It can help you to be able to be intentional and be able to focus in spite of things that are going on. And it also, by practicing this on a daily basis and reflecting on it each week, enables you to develop a deeper self-awareness of who you are, of what's important to you, of what you like and what you value. Also, to examine your knee-jerk emotional reactions. We all get them. We all have them. But why do you get them and have them? Why is the intensity different for certain situations, for certain words that are spoken, for certain events that happen, for you? And once you can start to examine these, you can then find out the root cause of it. And when you find out the root cause of it, it's the difference between cutting down a tree from the roots and cutting off a branch. And so you can address and deal with that situation so you are not continuously triggered. You're not like a puppet on a string that whenever this thing happens, it takes over. The amygdala hijack happens and you just react rather than respond. And the final point is to practice mindfulness meditation. Why? Because mindfulness simply helps you to focus on the present, to stay in the present. And whenever you navigate from that, to bring yourself back to the present and do that without judgment. And so this is such a powerful tool because then we are able to just be in the present, recognizing how we're feeling, why we're feeling that way without judging ourselves. So then we have the freedom and the liberty to explore where that came from and how we can address it. And so there you have it. These are simple and effective tools that you could start today and make yourself more aware. And as a result of that, impact every relationship you have, including the one with yourself. Improve your working abilities. Improve your success rate in whatever it is you're doing. And improve your overall well-being. The question left to ask is, will you do it? And that's the message for today. So I hope you found this useful. If you did, check out more videos on my YouTube channel that's dedicated to empowering and inspiring you. Thank you for watching this video. I hope that it edified you in some way, shape, or form. And if it did, I ask you to pay it forward by doing 2 simple things that can positively impact upon others. The first one is to leave a comment that will let me know what you took away from this video and how it served you. And the second thing will be to share it with 2 people that you love or care for, to help them learn and understand this key area that can impact their life. So stay blessed, remain grateful, and always magnify your greatness.